Old and ugly, my husband Fletcher joked, loud enough for the whole table to hear, like my face was part of the menu. I kept eating anyway, slow, neat, controlled, my fork steady over chicken I suddenly couldn't taste. He leaned in and added, "Stay in the back, embarrassing dress." Like my cheap navy dress was the crime, not his mouth. I didn't flinch, I didn't cry, I didn't ask him to stop. I just dabbed my lips, slid my napkin to the left, and let the room watch me stay calm. Then the CEO, new owner, new power, paused mid-sentence, looked past Fletcher, and held out a business card to me like it was a lifeline I hadn't requested. He didn't smile, he didn't wink. He simply said, "Mrs. Fletcher, we need to talk after dinner." And in that moment, with my silver locket warm against my collarbone and my emerald ring catching the chandelier light, I knew something had been set in motion that Fletcher couldn't bully back into place. Tell me exactly what was changed. Tell me where you're listening from. Fletcher had dragged me into that corporate gala like you drag a suitcase you're ashamed to own. Useful, but not to be seen. The ballroom was all glass and crystal, the kind of place where even water looks expensive, where women's laughter stays polite and men's watches flash like warnings. Fletcher kept touching my elbow, steering me behind him, always behind him, as if my presence might lower his stock price. I let him. I watched him. I counted the ways he tried to erase me in public without laying a hand on my face. When he made that old and ugly joke, he did it with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. His business allies chuckled the way people chuckle when they're afraid of the wrong person hearing the wrong thing. I saw one of his lawyers, slick hair, white teeth, smirk into his wine. I saw a woman from HR glance away like she'd learned long ago that looking is the same as choosing a side. And I saw something else too. A small movement at the head table, a pause so quiet it felt like air pressure changing. The CEO, Grant Hale, according to the raised gold lettering on the stage banner, had arrived that month like weather. New owner, new board, new rules. Fletcher had been calling him sir all week with a voice I didn't recognize, a voice that sounded like borrowed confidence. At home, Fletcher had practiced speeches in the mirror. His tie loosened, his phone buzzing with panic calls he pretended were nothing. At the gala, he overdid the charm, overdid the laugh, overdid the handshake. He needed everyone to believe he belonged in the inner circle. But Grant didn't look at Fletcher when Fletcher talked. Grant looked at me. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't sweet. It was a look like recognition mixed with calculation. Like a man who just spotted a missing file in a cabinet he thought was complete. My fingers tightened around my water glass, and my silver locket pressed into my skin as if reminding me it was there, the only thing on my body that was fully mine. Fletcher had paid for the ring, paid for the shoes, paid for the dress. But the locket? That was from before. That was from a life I'd learned to lock away. When Grant's assistant approached, she didn't address Fletcher first. She addressed me. "Mrs. Fletcher," she said softly, placing a thick cream business card beside my plate. Heavy paper, embossed letters. A second card too, an identical one, slid under the first, like the extra was intentional. I turned it over without rushing. On the back, in clean handwriting that didn't match the printed font, was a single line. After dinner, cafe across the lobby, G. Fletcher noticed the movement and snapped, "What's that?" Like the card was contraband. I didn't answer. I didn't hide it either. I just set it beside my knife and kept chewing. That's the part people don't understand about being humiliated after 45, after 50, after you've raised children and kept a home upright through other people's storms. You learn that dignity isn't loud. Dignity is choosing not to react in the way your enemy hopes you will. Fletcher wanted a scene. He wanted me to beg. He wanted to hiss at him so he could roll his eyes and say I was emotional. Instead, I swallowed, lifted my chin, and let the room see who had manners. And then Fletcher did something else, smaller but sharper. He reached under the table and tried to pinch my knee, a private warning. I slid my chair back 2 inches so his fingers caught air. I stood only when the applause rose for the CEO's speech, not a second earlier. I clapped politely. I smiled like I belonged there. And when Fletcher muttered, "Don't you embarrass me," I took my clutch, my phone inside, the call log already full of his frantic back and forth with unnamed numbers, and I walked to the ladies' room without saying a word. Inside the restroom, I stared at myself in the mirror under bright lights that don't flatter anybody. Navy dress, simple pearls, hair pinned neatly. Not glamorous, not young, but not ugly. Not to me. My locket sat at my throat, and for the first time in years, I opened it. The tiny photo inside had faded with time, but the outline was still there. A young man's face, a promise made and broken. A story I'd buried under diapers and mortgage payments, and a husband who liked me best when I stayed small. My phone buzzed. A text from Fletcher. "Where are you? Get back here." Then another. "Don't make me look for you." Then a third, immediate. Seriously, come back. Now. I didn't respond. I washed my hands. I took a breath. I put the locket back against my skin and walked out like I wasn't running from anything. But as I stepped into the lobby, I saw Grant Hale standing near the cafe entrance, his posture calm, his eyes fixed on me like he'd been waiting the whole evening for this one quiet moment. And Fletcher, still at the table, had no idea what that small, heavy business card was about to unlock. So tell me, why would a CEO bypass my husband to speak to me? Fletcher always told people I didn't do numbers, like I was allergic to math instead of busy keeping our life running. It sounded almost kind when he said it at church dinners or neighborhood cookouts. The way some men say, my wife doesn't like driving at night. But it wasn't kindness, it was strategy. Because the day I let him handle the bills, just to make it easier, he started collecting power the way some people collect coins. Quietly, obsessively, and with the smug certainty that I'd never notice what was missing until it was too late. Our house wasn't flashy, but it was ours. Brick, tidy porch, a maple tree we planted when our son moved out. Yet the deed paperwork lived in Fletcher's office, tucked in a locked drawer beneath old tax folders and client contracts. I had keys to the house, keys to the car, keys to the garden shed, but I didn't have the key to that drawer. When I asked once, years ago, he laughed and said, "You'd just lose it." And I let that stand because I was tired, and tired women let too many things stand. He also kept the mail sorted like a gatekeeper. Anything important went straight to him. Bank statements, insurance notices, anything with official seals. If my name appeared on an envelope, he'd bring it to me already opened, already explained, already minimized. "Nothing you need to worry about," he'd say, as if worry was a childish habit, and he was the adult in charge of my feelings. He'd hand me a pen for birthdays and school forms, but never for finances. That night after the CEO dinner, I didn't go back to the table. I didn't storm out either. I simply walked to the cafe across the lobby the way the note instructed, my heels quiet on marble, my phone warm in my palm. Grant Hale was seated in a corner booth, away from the crowd, a black folder in front of him, and a plain ceramic cup of coffee steaming beside it. He looked older than the man in my locket, but his eyes were the same. Sharp, tired, carrying a memory he hadn't put down. "Thank you for coming," he said. I sat without asking permission. That surprised me, my own body choosing space like I deserved it. He didn't start with small talk. He didn't ask about the weather or the gala menu. He nodded once toward my locket, like he'd seen it from across the room. "You still have it," he said quietly. My throat tightened, but I didn't let it show. I reached up and held the locket between my fingers. "It's mine," I said. 3 simple words. A boundary. A claim. Grant's jaw worked like he was swallowing something bitter. "Your husband," he said, voice low, "isn't who he told me he was." That sentence landed heavier than any insult Fletcher had ever thrown. Grant explained piece by piece what Fletcher had been doing inside the company. Small irregularities that had become big ones, expenses that didn't match project needs, vendor relationships that looked too cozy, signatures that appeared where they shouldn't. Grant had bought into the firm and immediately flagged Fletcher's department for review. "He's been panicking," Grant said, eyes flicking to my phone. "That call log in your hand. It's been like that for weeks, hasn't it?" I looked down and realized my screen was still open. Recent calls stacked like evidence. Fletcher calling unknown, Fletcher calling Derek, Fletcher calling legal, Fletcher calling back-to-back like a man trying to patch a sinking boat with his bare hands. Evidence seed number 2 sat right there in my palm, glowing and undeniable, and I felt something cold move through me. Fear, yes, but also clarity. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Grant didn't pretend it was only business. "Because he humiliated you in front of my leadership team," he said simply. "And because when he did, I saw something I don't ignore." His gaze didn't soften. "I saw a woman who has been managed like an asset, not treated like a partner." I almost laughed at the irony. My husband reduced me to a liability, and the CEO saw me as capacity. Grant slid his business card closer. "If you're willing," he said, "I want you to meet with me tomorrow morning, privately, off-site, cafe on River Street. No company badges, no gala clothes." He tapped the second card, one I hadn't noticed until then, with a different number printed on it. "This line connects to my compliance counsel. They can explain your rights. Your husband has been using joint finances like leverage. If he files anything, we need you protected." The word files made my skin prickle, because Fletcher had threatened that before, in smaller ways. When I disagreed with him about visiting my sister, he'd say, "Careful, don't make me cut you off." When I asked why his phone was always locked, he'd say, "You like this house? Then trust me." I'd heard it so many times I'd started to believe the roof over my head was rented from his mood. I asked Grant the question I didn't want to ask. "Are you saying Fletcher can freeze our money?" Grant's eyes didn't blink. "He can try," he said. With the right attorney, the right judge, the right story, men like him file for temporary financial orders to force compliance. He paused. But stories fall apart when paperwork is real. Paperwork. The word made my stomach turn because I knew how little of it I'd ever held in my own hands. When I got home later that night, the house was dark except for the light in Fletcher's office. I heard the printer running, steady, urgent. I stood in the hallway and watched through the cracked door. Fletcher was hunched over his desk, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, stapling packets with the kind of focus he never gave our family dinners. A stack of sealed legal documents sat beside him, thick envelopes with certified labels, like he'd been preparing to mail pieces of my life away. He looked up and saw me. His face snapped into rage so fast it felt rehearsed. "Where were you?" he hissed. "Do you know how that looked?" I didn't apologize. I didn't explain. I just held up Grant's card between two fingers, calm as prayer. Fletcher's eyes locked onto it, and for the first time all evening, I saw real fear underneath his arrogance. "Give me that," he said, standing. I slipped the card into my clutch and stepped back. "No," I said quietly. His mouth twisted. "You think you're important because some CEO noticed you?" He scoffed, but his hands shook as he reached for his phone. "You don't even understand what you're playing with." I stared at the sealed documents on his desk, my heart thudding. "What are those?" I asked. Fletcher smiled without warmth. "Insurance," he said. "Protection." He took a step closer. "And if you don't get back in line, you'll learn what it feels like to have nothing." Then his phone buzzed and he answered on the first ring, voice suddenly soft, respectful. "Yes," he said. "I understand. Tomorrow, first thing." He hung up and looked at me like I was a problem he couldn't afford. And as I backed out of the doorway, my keys cold in my hand, I realized I didn't even know which accounts had my name on them anymore, if any. So what exactly was Fletcher preparing to file against me? The next morning, Fletcher didn't yell. He didn't insult me. He did something worse. He acted calm, like he'd already won. He set a single envelope on the kitchen counter beside my coffee mug, the kind of envelope that makes your chest tighten before you even read it. It was sealed. Official looking. My name printed in block letters like a courtroom had already decided who I was. Fletcher slid it toward me with two fingers, careful not to smudge anything, as if the paper itself was fragile power. "I'm going to make this simple," he said. "We have a temporary order hearing this afternoon. My attorneys filed it last night." He sipped his coffee, casual. "Joint assets will be frozen until you cooperate. No withdrawals, no transfers, no little surprises." I picked up the envelope and felt the thickness. Pages, exhibits, attachments. Sealed legal documents just like I'd seen in his office. Evidence seed number 3 sat in my hands now, and the first page inside had a line that made my stomach drop. Motion for temporary financial restraint. Fletcher's name. My name. A request to freeze joint funds to prevent dissipation. Dissipation. Like I was the one who couldn't be trusted. He watched my face closely, waiting for panic, waiting for tears. I didn't give him either. I read every line slowly, like I was learning a new language I'd been denied. I noticed the dates. I noticed the bank account numbers. Some I recognized, some I didn't. And then I noticed one phrase near the bottom that made my fingers go numb. Respondent has limited understanding of financial matters. Fletcher had written my whole life into a sentence and handed it to a judge. "What do you want?" I asked, voice steady. Fletcher's smile sharpened. "You'll sign a postnuptial agreement," he said. "You'll acknowledge I manage the finances. You'll agree to move out for a while, quietly, until this blows over at work." He leaned in. "And you will not speak to Grant Hale again. Not once. Not ever." There it was. The real target wasn't just my money. It was my silence. I set the papers down, folded my hands, and did the thing women like me learn to do when a man tries to corner them. I asked a question instead of begging. "Why are you so afraid of him?" I said. Fletcher's jaw clenched. For half a second, the calm cracked. "I'm not afraid," he snapped too quickly. Then he recovered, shrugging. "He's just a CEO, and CEOs don't stay. Boards shift. He'll be gone, and I'll still be here." But his eyes didn't match his words. His eyes looked like a man staring at a door he knows will open whether he wants it to or not. After he left for the office, I didn't chase him. I didn't call my sister. I didn't collapse. I did what I should have done years earlier. I gathered objects like a woman gathering proof. I took my phone and screenshotted the call log, the panic calls, the late-night legal contacts, the back-to-back rings that screamed debt and danger. I took Grant's business card out of my clutch and placed it on the table beside the legal packet, like two worlds colliding on my kitchen wood. I opened my locket again and stared at the faded photo, my thumb brushing the edge as if I could pull the past into focus. and I slid my emerald ring off, setting it down with a soft click that sounded like a decision. Then I made a call. Not to Grant. Not yet. I called the number on the second business card, the one Grant had said went straight to Compliance Council. A woman answered with a voice trained to stay calm. "Hale Industries Compliance Council," she said. "This line is recorded for accuracy." Recorded. That word steadied me. Because records don't lie the way people do. I told her my name. I told her I was the spouse of Fletcher. I told her about the CEO dinner. I repeated the humiliation quote exactly. Old and ugly. And I added the other line too, because cruelty comes in clusters. Stay in the back. Embarrassing dress. I heard my own voice say it out loud, and instead of breaking me, it clarified me. The counsel didn't gasp. She didn't offer pity. She asked questions, precise ones. "Do you have access to joint account statements?" she asked. "Not directly," I admitted. "Do you have any documents he's filed?" she asked. I looked at the packet on my table. "Yes," I said. "A motion to freeze joint assets." "Do you have reason to believe he's using financial leverage to silence you?" she asked. I glanced at the sealed pages again, at the sentence about my limited understanding. "Yes," I said, and my voice didn't shake. "That's exactly what this is." She instructed me to bring 3 things to the River Street Cafe meeting Grant had scheduled. The legal packet, my phone screenshots, and any identifying documents I had, license, marriage certificate copy, anything with my signature. "We will not advise you as your personal attorney," she said carefully. "But we can connect you to resources, and we can ensure you're not retaliated against inside company-related matters." Company-related matters. I understood that phrase differently now. Fletcher's threat wasn't just at home, it was tied to whatever he'd been doing at work. That afternoon, instead of going to the hearing with Fletcher like a scolded child, I went to the cafe on River Street. Grant was already there, seated with the same black folder, a pen laid neatly across it like a boundary line. Across from him sat a man in a plain suit, no flashy watch, no ego, who introduced himself in one sentence. "I'm Mark Ellis," he said, "former federal fraud investigator, now retained by Hale Industries as part of an ongoing compliance review." Ongoing, federal, review. My lungs tightened. Not because it felt like salvation, because it felt like truth arriving with paperwork. Grant didn't touch my hand. He didn't speak to me like a girl rescued. He spoke to me like an adult with agency. "You're here," he said. "That's step 1. I placed Fletcher's packet on the table. The sealed documents looked heavier under cafe light. Mark opened his own folder and slid a single page toward me. No logos, no drama, just clean type. "There's an existing federal inquiry involving vendor payments in your husband's division," he said. "We can't discuss details, but if you have documentation showing coercion or concealment, it matters." Grant's gaze stayed on the legal packet. "Did he file this because you spoke to me?" he asked. I swallowed. "He filed it because he thinks I might," I said. Mark nodded once, then pointed to my packet. "There's something in here," he said. "The numbers, the accounts." He tapped the page with the bank references. "If he's freezing joint assets, it suggests he's trying to control what you can disclose, and that suggests he's afraid of what will be found." I wanted to ask Grant a question that had been haunting me since the gala. Why he recognized my locket. Why his eyes looked like memory. But the immediate pressure was bigger. Fletcher's hearing. Fletcher's threats. Fletcher's attempt to starve me into obedience. Grant leaned back and said the sentence that shifted the ground beneath my feet. "He scheduled a hearing," he said. "But he also scheduled something else. Tomorrow morning. Notary conference room, company counsel present." My stomach dropped. "What for?" I asked. Grant's voice stayed even. "To restructure reporting lines," he said. "To formalize authority." His eyes sharpened. "To make sure you never have a seat at the table again." Mark slid his pen across the cafe table toward me. "You need your own attorney," he said. "Today." And as I stared at that pen and the sealed papers and the CEO's card, I realized Fletcher hadn't just filed to freeze money. He'd set an appointment to lock me out of everything. Permanently. So what exactly was waiting for me in that notary conference room tomorrow? That night, I didn't sleep in my bed. Not because I was scared of Fletcher hurting me. He didn't throw punches, he threw paperwork. But because I was finally scared of what I'd lose if I kept pretending peace was safety. I slept on the sofa with my phone on my chest, the call log still open like a heartbeat, and my keys clenched in my fist like a child. Around midnight, Fletcher came home and didn't look at me. He walked past me as if I'd already been erased. Then he locked his office door with a quiet click that sounded like a judge's gavel. In the morning, I did 3 practical things before sunrise. I made copies, I secured identification, and I removed my emotions from the driver's seat. I went to the file cabinet where we kept birth certificates and immunization records and pulled out our marriage certificate copy. I took photos of it with my phone. I found my driver's license and passport and placed them in a plain folder. I printed my screenshots of Fletcher's call log and tucked them behind the legal motion packet. Then I placed Grant's business card on top like a bookmark in a story that had finally turned its page. When Fletcher came into the kitchen, he glanced at the folder and smirked. "Going to play lawyer today?" he asked. I poured my coffee. "I'm going to listen," I said. He laughed. "You don't even know what to listen for." I didn't argue. I just picked up my car keys, real keys, not his, and walked out. The notary conference room was not a dramatic place. No mahogany stage, no shouting, just a long table, a tray of water bottles, and a small metal stamp sitting beside a stack of official paper. That stamp mattered, because stamps make things real in the eyes of institutions, and Fletcher had been relying on institutions to believe his version of me. Fletcher was already there with 2 attorneys, one from the night of the gala, slick and smug, and a third man I didn't recognize who wore a company badge and avoided eye contact. The notary sat at the far end, hands folded, neutral as stone, and when I walked in, Fletcher's expression tightened like he hadn't expected me to show up at all. "Why is she here?" one attorney asked, tone dismissive. Fletcher answered without looking at me. "Because she's emotional," he said, as if that was a diagnosis. "And I want this clean." I placed my folder on the table and sat. Then Grant Hale walked in. No entourage, no theatrics, just him, his compliance counsel, and Mark Ellis, the former federal investigator, carrying a thin binder and a calm expression that made Fletcher's face blanch. Fletcher's hands moved toward his phone, then stopped, like even the act of calling for help had become risky. Grant didn't greet Fletcher first. He greeted the notary. "Thank you for being here," he said, professional. Then he turned to the attorneys. "Before we proceed," he said, "I need to verify identity and authority." The phrase verify identity sounded small, but it was the mechanism of justice beginning to turn. Mark opened his binder and slid a page toward the notary. "We have a request for certified copies of any documents executed in this room today," he said. "And we request the notary confirm who requested the meeting and under what representation." One of Fletcher's attorneys scoffed. "This is internal corporate structuring," he said. "Not a courtroom." Grant's gaze didn't waver. "It's still recordable," he said. "And recordable things need to be accurate." That's when I noticed something I'd missed before. On the notary's table, next to the stamp, was a small stack of business cards. Grant's assistant must have placed them there earlier. The top one was Grant's, heavy paper, embossed letters. And on the back of the one visible to me, I could see handwriting. My heart thudded. It was the same handwriting from the gala. G. Evidence seed number 1 was sitting in plain sight, and it wasn't just a card. It was proof that Grant had initiated contact with me directly, that this wasn't some fantasy Fletcher could dismiss as me getting ideas. It was documented intent, a record in ink, and I felt my spine straighten with a kind of quiet power I hadn't felt in years. Fletcher's attorney leaned toward me and said, low and venomous, "You're making this worse." I looked at him, then at Fletcher. "Worse for who?" I asked. The room went still. Grant spoke again. "Mrs. Fletcher is here," he said, "because her name appears on multiple accounts connected to this restructuring." He glanced at Mark, who nodded once. Mark slid another page across the table, this one with a list of account references and vendor IDs, redacted but clear enough to show pattern. "We've identified discrepancies between reported revenue and actual cash flow," Mark said. "And we have reason to believe personal joint accounts were used as temporary pass-throughs." Fletcher's face hardened. "That's absurd," he snapped. Mark didn't argue. He simply turned to the notary. "We are requesting the notary record the refusal or acceptance of verification questions," he said. "Standard procedure." The notary, still neutral, nodded and picked up the pen. Fletcher's attorney tried to regain control. "This meeting is about reporting structure," he insisted, tapping a document on the table. "Mr. Fletcher retains his position. Mrs. Fletcher has no role here. She is not employed by the company." Grant's voice stayed calm, but it carried. "That's one of the things being evaluated," he said. Fletcher's head snapped up. "Evaluated?" he repeated, too loud. Grant leaned forward slightly. "Your treatment of your spouse at my dinner," he said, "was unprofessional and revealing. But more importantly, the way you've tried to control access to information, to finances, to records, matches the pattern we're investigating." Fletcher's hand went to his tie like it was choking him. "You're punishing me because of a joke," he hissed. Grant's eyes didn't blink. "I'm responding to risk," he said, "and your joke wasn't funny." I could feel Fletcher's rage turning, looking for a place to land. His attorneys shifted in their seats, suddenly less smug. The company badge man stared at the table like he wanted to disappear, and I sat there with my folder, my phone, my locket, and my ring now tucked safely into my pocket. objects that suddenly felt like anchors instead of ornaments. Then Mark said the sentence that made my skin prickle with both fear and relief. "Mrs. Fletcher," he said, "we'd like your consent to share your documentation with the appropriate authorities if needed." Appropriate authorities. Federal words in a corporate room. Fletcher's chair scraped backward. "This is a setup," he snapped. She's being manipulated. She's old. Grant cut him off with one quiet line. "Enough," he said. And in that moment, I realized the mechanism wasn't revenge. It was verification. Records, signatures, certified copies. The slow, inevitable grind of truth against a man who'd relied on charm and control. But Grant wasn't done, and neither was Fletcher. Because the notary lifted the pen and asked the first formal question, and Fletcher's attorney immediately tried to stop her. So what question were they so terrified of answering on the record? The notary's voice was calm, practiced, almost gentle. "Before any document is executed," she said, "I need to confirm all parties understand what they are signing and that no one is under duress." Duress. That word hit Fletcher like a slap. His attorney leaned forward fast. "She's not signing anything," he snapped, pointing at me as if I was a misbehaving employee. "This is corporate." The notary didn't argue. She simply looked at Grant. "Mr. Hale?" she asked. Grant nodded toward Mark, who opened his binder again and placed a single page in front of the notary. Plain, typed, official in tone. "This is a request," Mark said, "for the notary to document that Mrs. Fletcher is present and that her spouse has filed a motion to freeze joint assets within the past 24 hours. Fletcher's face went red. "That is private," he barked. Mark's reply was quiet. "It became relevant when you tried to exclude her from a meeting connected to accounts bearing her name." Fletcher's lawyers started talking at once. Procedures, objections, confidentiality. The room filled with words designed to overwhelm, the same tactic Fletcher used at home. Talk fast, talk loud, make me feel stupid, and I'll retreat. I watched them like I was watching a storm from inside a sturdy house. Then I did my dignified move. I slid my phone across the table and turned the screen toward the notary. On it was the call log, Fletcher's panic calls, his late-night legal, his repeated attempts to control the narrative. Evidence seed number 2, now placed in the open like a candle. And beside the phone, I placed Fletcher's motion packet, evidence seed number 3, open to the page that described me as financially incompetent. I didn't speak yet. I let objects speak first. The notary's eyes scanned the page, then lifted to Fletcher. "Mr. Fletcher," she said, "is your spouse under any financial restraint filed by you at this time?" Fletcher's attorney jumped in. "Objection. This is not court," the notary said calmly. "It's documentation. Answer yes or no." Fletcher's throat worked. "It's temporary," he said. "Yes or no?" the notary repeated. Fletcher's jaw clenched. "Yes," he snapped. The room shifted, not dramatically, just enough to feel the air change. Grant's compliance counsel spoke for the first time, voice measured. "Mrs. Fletcher," she said, "do you feel you are under duress or coercion regarding any document presented in this meeting?" Fletcher turned to me with a look that used to silence me. "Don't," he mouthed, barely moving his lips. I glanced at my locket through the neckline of my dress, feeling its weight. I thought of the years I'd stayed quiet to keep the peace. I thought of the sentence in his filing that reduced me to limited understanding. And I thought of the way he'd laughed at me, old and ugly, in front of people who pretended not to notice. I met the counsel's eyes. "Yes," I said clearly. "I do." Fletcher's chair scraped back hard. "You're lying," he hissed. The notary lifted her pen and wrote it down. Written, recorded, permanent. Fletcher's attorney tried another tactic. He slid a different document toward me, a glossy packet with tabs, post-nuptial agreement, property allocations, voluntary separation terms. A pen was placed on top, angled toward my right hand like a trap laid politely. "Sign this," the attorney said softly, the way you speak to a child you're trying to calm. "And this all goes away." Fletcher leaned in, voice low and urgent. "Just sign," he said. "You don't know what you're doing. You'll lose the house. You'll lose everything. Don't make me do this the hard way." My fingers hovered over the pen, not because I wanted to sign, but because I wanted to understand exactly what he was trying to steal. I opened the packet to the section labeled Real Property. There it was, in black and white, a clause that transferred my interest in the house to Fletcher for the purpose of debt management. Debt, that word again. I looked up. "What debt?" I asked. Fletcher's eyes flashed. "It's none of your business," he snapped, then quickly corrected himself with a forced smile. "It's business debt. You wouldn't understand." Grant's voice cut through the tension. "She understands enough to ask the right question," he said. Then Mark did something that didn't feel like a miracle. It felt like process. He slid one more page onto the table, face down, and said to the notary, "We'd like this attached to today's record as an exhibit." The notary nodded and reached for it. Fletcher lunged a hand forward. "No," he barked. Grant's compliance counsel spoke sharply. "Do not interfere with the notary," she warned. Fletcher froze, breathing hard. The notary flipped the page over, and I saw a header at the top that made my stomach flip. Notice of pending review. Financial Crimes Unit Liaison. Not an arrest, not a verdict, not a cinematic takedown. A notice. A door opening. Fletcher's attorneys went quiet like someone had cut the power. Mark's voice stayed even. "There is already an existing federal inquiry," he said. "This exhibit indicates the inquiry has escalated based on new documentation." He looked at me. "Your packet and your screenshots contributed." Fletcher stared at me like I'd betrayed him by telling the truth. "You did this," he breathed. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I simply pushed the pen back across the table toward his attorney and said, "I'm not signing anything today." The notary wrote again. Refusal. Documented. Grant leaned forward, eyes on Fletcher, and said one sentence that made the room feel suddenly smaller. "Effective immediately," he began. Fletcher's face twisted, desperate, and his attorney grabbed the packet like he could physically erase what had been recorded. And I realized the next words out of Grant's mouth would change my whole life, either for better or for worse. So what did the CEO say next, with the notary's stamp sitting right there in reach? "Effective immediately," Grant said, voice steady. "Mr. Fletcher is placed on administrative leave pending review." It wasn't shouted. It wasn't dramatic. It was official. Fletcher's mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. His attorney sputtered, "You can't, this is retaliation." Grant lifted one hand. "It's risk management," he said, the same phrase he'd used before. "And it's standard procedure when financial controls are compromised." Mark slid a final document toward the notary. "This is the acknowledgement of leave and access restriction," he said. "We need it stamped and attached to today's record." Stamped, attached, recorded. The notary picked up her stamp and pressed it down with a firm, clean motion. That sound, the small, solid thump, was the sound of my life shifting from Fletcher's private bullying to institutional accountability. Fletcher finally found his voice. "She's nothing," he spat, pointing at me as if words could still reduce me. "She doesn't even work here. She's just my wife." Grant's eyes held him without flinching. "Your wife is a stakeholder in your behavior," he said. "And she is a person you chose to humiliate in front of my leadership team." His gaze flicked to me. "Mrs. Fletcher, you came today with documentation and composure. That matters." I felt my heart pounding, but my hands stayed calm on the table. Grant continued. "As part of our restructuring, I'm appointing Mrs. Fletcher as Director of Operations Liaison for the next 90 days. He turned slightly so the room could hear every word. "She will report directly to me and work with compliance to understand operational bottlenecks and employee morale, areas your husband's division has struggled with." Fletcher let out a bitter laugh. "She doesn't have a degree," he scoffed, desperation turning to cruelty again. "She can't even—" Grant cut him off, sharp. "She has experience," he said. "The kind you can't fake on a resume. She's managed a household, navigated conflict without collapsing, and demonstrated judgment under pressure." He glanced at the notary's record. "You, on the other hand, tried to use a motion to freeze joint assets to control her. That shows me exactly who I'm dealing with." My throat tightened. Not with romance, not with fantasy, just with the strange relief of being seen accurately after years of being described by someone else. But justice didn't stop at titles, because practical protection mattered more than a new chair at a corporate table. Grant's compliance counsel slid a card toward me, different from the gala cards, this one plain with a direct line. "This connects you to our partnered legal clinic," she said. "You still need personal counsel. Today." I nodded. I didn't argue. I didn't pretend pride could replace a lawyer. After the meeting, while Fletcher stormed out with his attorneys and threats spilling behind him like exhaust, "You'll regret this. You're ruining us. You'll come crawling back." Mark walked with me to the lobby and said, "Here's what happens next, realistically. No promises, no fairy tale, just steps." He explained that the notice of pending review wasn't a conviction. It was a formal escalation. It meant the documentation I'd provided, Fletcher's motion, the coercion record, the account references, had strengthened the existing inquiry. It meant financial records would be requested, vendor payments analyzed, and personal accounts scrutinized where legally permitted. It meant the truth would move slowly, but it would move. And then he added, "Your first protection is immediate. You need to prevent him from draining anything else." So I went straight to the bank. I sat across from a branch manager with a calm face and a folder full of stamped, dated records. My navy dress looked plain under fluorescent lights, but my posture didn't. I placed the notary-stamped leave acknowledgement on the desk, then Fletcher's motion packet, then my marriage certificate copy, then my ID. Objects in a line, evidence arranged like a bridge. I need a hold placed on any transfers that require dual consent, I said. And I need a review of authorized users and linked accounts. The manager didn't roll her eyes. She didn't dismiss me. She read the documents, then nodded slowly. We can place safeguards, she said, and we can print the account history for you today. Print. Today. Paper I could hold. When the printer spat out pages, I saw it. What Fletcher had hidden in plain sight. Transfers to vendors that weren't household related. Payments that didn't match our lifestyle. A line item labeled consulting reimbursement that repeated like a heartbeat. And the biggest discovery, a home equity line of credit I'd never agreed to, pending, not fully activated, but initiated. My stomach turned cold. That's what he wanted the house clause for. That's why he needed me to sign away my interest, so he could borrow against it without my interference. I took the printed statements, requested certified copies, and asked the manager to note in the system that any new credit actions required my in-person verification. The manager complied. No drama, just process. Then I went home, not to reconcile, not to beg, but to set boundaries with locks. I hired a licensed locksmith that afternoon. One-sentence credential, clear and practical. I'm bonded and insured, ma'am, he said, showing me his card. He didn't solve my life. He changed hardware. I changed access. When Fletcher arrived that evening, his key didn't work. He rattled the knob like a man used to doors opening for him. Open this, he shouted through the wood, voice cracking. This is my house. I stood inside, phone recording audio for my own protection. The new keys heavy in my palm. It's our house, I said through the door. And until my attorney says otherwise, you can communicate through counsel. He laughed like that was impossible. You don't have an attorney. I looked down at my phone. A voicemail notification blinked. From the legal clinic referral. I'd already spoken to a family law attorney who confirmed the basics. Don't sign, document coercion, protect assets, request emergency relief if necessary. Real steps, not drama. I do now, I said. He tried a softer voice, like he was changing masks. Come on, he pleaded. You can't do this. You don't even know what you're doing at that company. Grant is using you. He's... Stop, I said, calm. You used me. Silence on the other side of the door. Then the rage returned. You're old, he hissed. I'm done, I said, and I walked away from the door without another word. 2 days later, my attorney filed a response to Fletcher's motion, requesting the freeze be modified to prevent him from weaponizing it against me, and requesting transparency on all debts he claimed justified his actions. We attached the notary record. We attached the bank safeguards documentation. We attached the call log screenshots as context of coercive behavior. Paperwork answered paperwork. At work, my new role wasn't glamorous. It was meetings, listening, process mapping, employee conversations where people finally spoke without fear. I learned quickly what I already knew from running a home. People do better when they feel safe, and systems break when one person hoards control. I didn't pretend I was an MBA. I didn't need to. I asked questions, tracked answers, and documented patterns. And one afternoon, Grant's compliance counsel called me into a small office and said, "We received a formal request from federal investigators for additional records." She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply stated it as fact. Your documentation helped establish timeline and motive. Motive. Fletcher's motive wasn't love or protection. It was concealment. Weeks later, there were consequences. Not cinematic ones, not immediate fireworks, but real ones. Fletcher was removed permanently from his role after the company's internal findings, and repayment negotiations began for misdirected funds where applicable. The federal process continued in its own lane, slow and structured as it should. My attorney secured a temporary financial arrangement that ensured household bills were covered without giving Fletcher unchecked control. And the house, my house too, stayed protected from being leveraged behind my back. One evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a stamped copy of the updated banking safeguards, a small stack of certified statements, and my locket resting open beside my coffee. I placed the emerald ring in a dish, not as a trophy, not as a punishment, just as a reminder that things given can be used like chains if you let them. I wasn't old and ugly. I was seasoned, awake, and finally holding my own paperwork. Type respect. If you've lived this. I set 3 house rules and wrote them on a notepad I taped inside my cabinet door. No signing without counsel, no threats answered with emotion, no silence in exchange for safety. And when I heard Fletcher's voice in my head, mocking, belittling, I replaced it with the sound of that notary stamp, firm and final, reminding me that truth doesn't need to shout to be permanent. Now, when I eat dinner, I taste my food again. And if anyone ever tries to joke me into the shadows, they'll learn what Fletcher learned the hard way. I don't move back. I move forward,